We all good?
Mhm.
Hope so.
And we
Okay.
are now, we are now live on YouTube. So
Okay. Good evening. I'd like to call to order the meeting of Bellbrook City Council. Today's date, May the 10th, 2021. If you could please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
Allegiance
to the flag
flag
of the United States
States
of America and to the republic
Republic,
for which it stands,
stands
one
one
nation,
nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible, with liberty
liberty,
and justice for all. Okay, thank you. Pam, could you call the roll?
Mr. Hoke,
Here.
Mr. Havens,
Here.
Dr. Van Veldhuizen,
Here, ma'am.
Mr. Greenwood,
Here.
Mrs. Middlestetter,
here.
Mr. Edwards,
Here.
Mayor Schwaller.
Here, thank you. Before you should have the minutes of the last meeting, which was April the 12th. Does anyone have any changes or corrections to those minutes?
None, Mayor.
None, Mayor.
Seeing and hearing none, I declare the minutes approved as submitted. Tonight, I do have a couple of announcements. I want to first wish all of our Bellbrook mothers a belated Happy Mother's Day. I'm sorry that the weather did not cooperate, but hopefully everyone had a great day anyway with family and friends. Next up on the agenda is the EMS Week proclamation. Proclamation is for Emergency Medical Services Week, May 16th to 22nd, 2021. Whereas emergency medical services is a vital public service, and whereas the members of emergency medical services teams are ready to provide life-saving care to those in need 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and whereas access to quality emergency care dramatically improves the survival and recovery rate of those who experience sudden illness or injury, and whereas emergency medical services have grown to fill a gap by providing an important out-of-hospital care, including preventative medicine, follow-up care, and access to telemedicine. And whereas the emergency medical services system consists of first responders, emergency medical technicians, paramedics, emergency medical dispatchers, firefighters, police officers, educators, administrators, pre-hospital nurses, emergency physicians, trained members of the public, and other out-of-hospital medical care providers. Whereas the members of emergency medical services teams, whether career or volunteer, engage in thousands of hours of specialized training and continued education to enhance their life-saving skills. And whereas it is appropriate to recognize the value and the accomplishments of emergency medical services providers by designating Emergency Medical Services Week. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Michael W. Schweller, in recognition of this event, do hereby proclaim the week of May 16 to 22, 2021 as Emergency Medical Services Week. With EMS strong theme, this is EMS, caring for our communities. I encourage the community to observe this week with appropriate programs, ceremonies, and activities. And I'll go ahead and affix my name to this and we'll have it posted. I see the fire chief is on the call right now. Chief, did you want to add anything to this?
Yes, Mayor, I just, first of all, want to appreciate you and council for taking care of this and doing a proclamation for us. It's just one of the small ways that we can thank the men and women of the fire department for what they do on a daily basis for our community. So I know this means a lot to them as well, so appreciate it very much.
Thank you, and thanks for what you do, and thanks for what your department does. Does anyone else on council have any comments?
I'd like to thank the chief for all the training they go through and the service they provide. It's very important that they do what they do, and it's 24/7. And I've only heard good things about the department. And to me, it's amazing at some of the things that you're able to diagnose and know which way to go and assist people if they're on their way to the hospital. That's saves a lot of lives. Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
And also as a safety committee lead, I wanted to second those well wishes as well. And also a shout out to my wife, who's a ER nurse. If she sees this, I've heard a lot of wonderful, I've heard a lot of stories. So thank you for all that you do.
Thank you.
Second that.
Thank you.
Okay, Chief, once again, thanks a lot and look forward to an exciting week and hopefully uneventful.
There you go.
Only in a good
Thank
way.
you, guys.
Thanks. In addition to EMS Week, I'd also like to acknowledge that the month of May is Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. It is observed annually to celebrate the contributions that generations of AAPIs have made to American history, society, and culture. The origin of AAPI Heritage Month dates back to 1977, when Congress designated a week in May as AAPI Heritage Week. In 1990, President George H.W. Bush issued a presidential proclamation designating May of 1990 the first Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. In 1992, Congress permanently designated May of each year as Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. Over the course of the past year, a local group named Sugar Creek Cares has been working to promote racial justice in the Bellbrook Sugar Creek community. They have worked diligently to raise awareness to current issues, including the rise in hate crimes against the AAPI community. This type of violence and harassment will not be tolerated in our community. I ask that we all continue to educate ourselves regarding these issues and work toward putting an end to this type of behavior. Education reporting procedures may be found at AAPI Stop Hate at stopaapihate.org. If anyone has questions or wants that web address, it should be in our minutes, and we also will have it at the city. Does anyone else in council have any comments regarding Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month?
I'd just like to thank you, Mayor, for the proclamation. Well said. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to second that. Just appreciate the note and take an opportunity to remember the history and contributions to our society as a whole. Thank you.
Absolutely. That's the end of my announcements. We have no public hearings, but we do have an introduction of board ordinance. First up is ordinance 2021-5, Councilman Havens.
Thank you, Mayor. Ordinance number 2021-5, an ordinance repealing section 860, public shows and exhibitions of the City of Bellbrook Municipal Code. Whereas the Bellbrook Municipal Code added section 412.07, special events, to its codified ordinances with the adoption of ordinance 2019-16. And whereas section 412.07 of the Bellbrook Municipal Code provides regulations for various types of events open to the public in the city of Bellbrook. And whereas the Bellbrook Municipal Code section 860, public shows and exhibitions, is deemed no longer necessary and needs repealed in its entirety. Now therefore, the City of Bellbrook hereby ordains section 1, section 860, public shows and exhibitions of the City of Bellbrook Municipal Code is hereby repealed. Section 2, it is hereby found and determined that all formal actions of this council concerning and related to the adoption of this ordinance were adopted in an open meeting of this council, and that any and all deliberations of this council that resulted in such formal action were in meetings open to the public in compliance with all legal requirements, including but not limited to section 121.0 1.22 of the Ohio Revised Code. Section 3, this ordinance shall take effect and be enforced from and after the earliest period provided by law.
Thank you, Ernie.
So I would like to add, excuse me, that this section of the municipal code was actually discovered accidentally, as many of our sections of code have been kind of stumbled upon that we've addressed over the last couple of years. And this actual section of code was in a completely different section from what our special events area was in. So this was part of part 8. And our other sections of code that are related to special events and things like that are in part 4. So this was in a completely separate section, and it's an outdated section of code. And I did include the chapter 860 text in its entirety, just so the council could review it. And it basically regulates, theatrical exhibitions, public shows, performances, carnivals, and our section 412 already addresses all of those things. For just clarity, we thought that it would be best to just go ahead and repeal this section in its entirety. And it's been untouched since its original adoption back in 1974. So this is not something that we have licensed. I couldn't find the last time that a public show or exhibition was licensed under this ordinance. So it has been relatively unused as far as I could tell. So I could not find any licenses that have been granted for this. So things like the Sugar Maple Festival and things like that, none of those, even before we had our special event permit, were receiving these types of licenses. So we just thought that it would be best just for clarity to just go ahead and repeal that section since it's unused. And we have section 412 with special events.
Melissa, what was section 412 put into place?
2019.
Okay. And we just didn't realize that it was already out there in a different section, or we were working on the part 4 and not the part 8.
It was in a totally different section. Actually, it doesn't really make any sense where it's stuck. It's in between our solicitor's ordinance and sale of drug paraphernalia. So it's in a, you would have never thought to look there.
But I'm glad we took care of it and got it cleaned up. It makes more sense the way it is right now. Any more discussion on council?
I think it's worth pointing out that the old one discussed whether or not it was a paid show or exhibition, if money's charged. And our new section really just says if it's open to public. There might be some elements of the 860 that we could capture in the next change that we do in this section. I know, Melissa, you talked about doing a quick update on it anyway.
We're talking about it tonight.
Okay. I looked at it as kind of an easy workaround would be to the existing 412, that if they charged money for it, then it's not open to the public, and therefore they can completely get around 412. So it might just be worth a look at there. I don't know that I've got all the answers, but I thought it was insightful to see how we looked at it in 74.
Thanks, Ernie. Any other comments or questions? We have a motion regarding ordinance 2021-5.
I'll make a motion to introduce ordinance 2021-5.
Thank you. And a second.
I'll second.
Thank you, Nick.
A motion was made by Mr. Havens to introduce ordinance 2021-5, an ordinance repealing section 860, public shows and exhibitions of the Bellbrook Municipal Code, and this was seconded by Mr. Edwards. Mr. Havens?
Yes.
Mr. Edwards?
Yes.
Mr. Hoke?
Yes.
Dr. Van Veldhuizen,
Yes.
Mr. Greenwood,
Yes.
Mrs. Middlestetter,
Yes.
Mayor Schwaller.
Yes. Thank you, Pam. Next up is ordinance 2021-6. An ordinance repealing old section 1450.15. Councilman Greenwood.
Thank you, Mayor. Ordinance number 2021-6. An ordinance repealing old section 1450.15 labeled demolition of the Bellbrook Municipal Code and enacting a new section 1450.15 demolition of the Bellbrook Municipal Code. Whereas the Bellbrook Municipal Code includes section 1450.15 demolition, which outlines regulations for the demolition of structures in the city of Bellbrook. And whereas Article 14 of the Bellbrook zoning code provides that a certificate of appropriateness must be issued prior to any demolition occurring in the Old Village District. And whereas revisions to section 1450.15 are required to make this section more consistent with the requirements of Article 14 of the Bellbrook zoning code and to clarify notice requirements. Now therefore, the city of Bellbrook hereby ordains Section 1, the old section 1450.15 demolition of the Bellbrook Municipal Code is hereby repealed. Section 2, a new section 1450.15 demolition of the Bellbrook Municipal Code is hereby enacted as set forth in Exhibit A, which is attached hereunto and incorporated hereon by reference with deletions shown by strike through and additions by italics and underline. Section 3, it is hereby found and determined that all formal actions of this council concerning and relating to the adoption of this ordinance were adopted in an open meeting of this council, and that any and all deliberations of this council shall resulted in such formal action wherein meetings open to the public in compliance with all legal requirements, including but not limited to section 121.22 of the Ohio Revised Code. Section 4, that this ordinance shall take effect and be in force from and after the earliest period provided by law.
Thank you, Forrest.
So actually, there was a village review board meeting last week where a hearing was held in order to request demolition of a building in the Old Village District. And so when we were looking at that process and referring back to the demolition ordinance that we've got in front of us, which is a relatively new ordinance that was passed just in recent years, we did notice that part of the demolition plan did not include a copy of the certificate of appropriateness, which would be issued by the village review board if the structure was located in the Old Village District. So we wanted to add that. And then we also started to think about the transfer of a permit. And so I conferred with Greene County Building Regulations, and they actually will allow for the transfer of a demolition permit because the county has their own demolition permit as well. So they allow for the transfer as long as an owner puts it in writing. So if I were to sell to my neighbor and I got a demolition permit through the county, I could say, I wish to transfer my demolition permit to this individual, and you could put that on file with the Greene County Building Regulations. So we thought that we would afford that same, we would extend that same courtesy to anybody that had a demolition permit, because that might be something that somebody might want to go ahead and go through with when they're selling a property in order to make it an easier transaction for the buyer. So Forrest and I had talked about that when this issue came up with the village review board. So those were the two sections, adding adding letter E6 and then also adding letter F. And then when our municipal attorney took a look at the ordinance, the other strike throughs and references that were added, some typographical stuff, he had went ahead and modified some things related to those. He also added that notice would have to be 30 days instead of 20 if anybody was going to, if anything was going to be ordered to be demolished. So he did extend that. So I agreed with his recommendations, but where this really started was adding the certificate of appropriateness if located in the Old Village District, and then the ability to transfer a permit as well. So that was what we did.
Thank you, Melissa. Any discussion among council?
Just like to make a comment that allowing transfer is just, to me, common sense, and it alleviates somebody that maybe changed their mind about the property and decides to sell, then it's easily transferred, and I appreciate you changing that. Thanks.
I had a little difficulty figuring out what a certificate of appropriateness was. Finally tracked it down into somewhere in Article 14. Just a thought that a reference of where it's at or something like you kind of explained, Melissa, that might help. Outside of that, I don't have any issue.
So we were editing Article 14, so I was a little hesitant to put in an exact section because the section that it is in today is likely been renumbered and lettered. So that's the problem with rewrites, is if you change something one place, then you might have to change it 5 other places. So
Good point. Good point.
Any other comments or questions on council? Seeing none, we have a motion for the introduction of ordinance 2021-6.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to adopt introduction ordinance number 2021-6.
Thank you. In a second.
I'll second.
Thank you.
A motion was made by Mr. Greenwood to introduce ordinance 2021-6, an ordinance repealing old section 1450.15 demolition of the Bellbrook Municipal Code and enacting a new section 1450.15 demolition of the Bellbrook Municipal Code. And this was seconded by Mr. Havens. Mr. Greenwood,
Yes.
Mr. Havens,
Yes.
Mr. Hope,
Yes.
Dr. Van Veldhuizen,
Yes.
Mrs. Middlestetter,
Yes.
Mr. Edwards,
Yes.
Mayor Schwaller.
Yes. Thank you, Pam. We have no resolutions tonight, nor do we have any old business, but we do have 3 items under new business. The first item is apparently we need a motion to waive the signed ordinance for the community garage sale occurring May 20th to the 22nd.
I'll make that motion, Mayor.
Thank you, Dr. Dave. In a second.
I'll second.
And again, thank you, Nick. And this is something we do on a routine basis. And I think most people are pretty good about putting the signs up and taking the signs down when the garage sale is over. But I think they all want to be known and identified. And it seems like a big event. And I know there's a lot of participants.
A motion was made by Dr. Van Veldhuizen to waive the sign ordinance for the community garage sale, May 20th through 22nd, 2021. This was seconded by Mr. Edwards. Dr. Van Veldhuizen,
Yes.
Mr. Edwards,
Yes.
Mr. Hope,
Yes.
Mr. Havens,
Yes.
Mr. Greenwood,
Yes.
Mrs. Middlestetter,
Yes.
Mayor Schwaller.
Yes. Thank you, Pam. Next up is a review of the special event ordinance provisions. This is section 412. Go ahead, Melissa.
I am gonna screen share because I believe that the version that was in the packet might not have shown up correctly. So the special events ordinance was put into place in 2019, I believe. And so we saw this in action in 2019. And obviously 2020, this was not really used, but it did, just because of everything that happened, special events just weren't happening. So whenever you introduce code language, once you see it in action, sometimes there are tweaks that can be made. And so that's the case with this one. And so the real purpose behind the whole thing was so that if somebody was having a temporary special event, we wanted to make sure that if it was open up to the public, that participants would be safe and that proper insurancing was secured and things like that. So we had geared this originally toward any property in which the general public was being invited. And so after speaking with some insurance professionals, a private property would either, whether it be a homeowner or a commercial property, their own liability insurance should cover against any special events. However, it is still recommended that if you're having the general public on private property, that you do make sure that you're covered and possibly get your own special events insurance for that particular event, just to make sure that you're covered. So knowing that homeowners insurance and private property, commercial insurance, liability insurance should cover against anything like this, we thought that we would dial it back, because what we don't want to do is we don't want to be cumbersome. We don't want to discourage any type of events that are being held. So what we did was we removed references to private property from the ordinance, and we are just gearing it toward any public property. So most of the language is striking any reference to a private property. So as we go through here, if we look at A, you can see where city-owned was kind of stricken out, and then public property within the municipality and open to the general public. And then we've got our definitions of public property, which includes city-owned parking lots, city-owned buildings, and any public right-of-way included but not limited to streets and sidewalks. And then when we look at temporary special event definition, we go ahead and take out the may be held on city-owned property or private property. We went ahead and remove that reference. And then any activity such as a festival, carnival, circus, trade show, art, craft show, car show, public dance, parade, concert. So we kind of modified that language just a little bit. And then with 3, we struck city facilities to just put public property, again, since that was defined up at the top. And then we struck number 5 because it was more related to the mobile food vehicles. We really don't have an ordinance for that. So we just kind of took that out because we ended up including that in the temporary structures. And then we removed sorry, 7:30 came up, and then there's that other meeting that just randomly started up. So sorry for that disruption. So, so then we defined temporary structures, which meant stages, tents, food trucks, seating areas, portable restrooms. And then with number 3, we took off that a letter of permission from the owner of the property would be needed, because obviously this is all public property, so we wouldn't need a letter of permission. That would only refer to private property. And then,
Melissa, are you sharing your screen?
Pardon me?
Are you sharing your screen? I thought you said you were sharing the screen. I couldn't find it.
Yeah, I'm sharing it. Can anybody else see it?
I have it.
Yeah, I have it.
Same.
It's probably your view.
Yeah, I'm not seeing, sorry, go ahead, I apologize.
I did email it to everybody, Ernie, so everybody has the red line version in their email too. I sent it just right before we started.
Thank you.
I tweaked language about conflicts. Multiple special events should be able to go on at the same time as long as city could handle it. Just located in the same area, obviously. If two things wanted to have it in the same area, that would be a problem. And then still requiring liability insurance, just because if it's held on public property, that should be secured by the person that's holding the event, such as like the Sugar Maple Festival, Lions Club Festival, things like that. And regularly occurring events, it's only related to the same type of regularly occurring event. So if somebody wanted to have something in the street, but it's a different type of event each time, we wanted it only to be related to the same type of event. So if it was going to be a weekly car show, that's fine. But if it was going to be a car show and then a circus and then a parade, just with the same person having it, we wanted to make sure that that would have separate consideration for each. And then sidewalk obstructions, we just said that they be specifically outlined in the application with an alternate route, because Sugar Maple Festival, they use some of the sidewalks for various things. So we didn't want to completely discourage that, but just make sure that we've got the flow of traffic still maintained. I tweaked time frame of signage with a single occurrence event, and then removed private events. And then we added a provision under penalty that, if somebody holds an event and they don't follow the regulations, that they might not receive approval for future permits. We just reserve that right. And then exceptions, we accepted anything held on public property sponsored by the Bell Berkshire Parks District, the school district, any sidewalk sales that would be related to the permitted principal business. So if we had a festival and some folks wanted to put things out on the sidewalk as part of that event, but not necessarily as part of the festival, that they would still be allowed to do that. And then any events held on city-owned property and sponsored by the city, because our own liability insurance would cover that, such as the farmer's market. So I wanted council to be able to have the opportunity to take a look at some of the recommended changes of the ordinance before we bring it for final consideration at a future meeting. So at this point, I would like to receive any feedback that council might have, so that we could tweak this and make this even better.
Melissa, this was first put into service in 2020, I believe, or 2019?
2019.
Okay. Have we had a lot of feedback about it?
The private property thing has been vocalized in terms of the city should not be basically regulating the private property, but it did take some consideration, because we wanted to make sure that if it was open to the public, that if somebody were to get hurt or something go wrong, that that would be an event or an incident that would be covered. But knowing that that would fall to the property owner and their own liability insurance, it really isn't something that I felt that we needed to necessarily require additional insurance and oversight on. So the last thing that I want to do is make it more difficult for people to have special events, because they're so important to the community. And I definitely want to encourage it and not discourage it. So I think anything that would be held on a street or public property, that is not an insured space necessarily, unless it's something that we are doing or the schools are doing or the parks are doing, because we would have our own insurance. So if a organization wanted to do something on public property, really, we just want to make sure that we're aware, we're able to provide city services for that, and that the event is insured.
Okay. Yeah, I had a citizen call me about that one point in time, and they did suggest that it looked like an event in a private yard would be covered, and I'm glad we've excluded that, because I never thought that belonged in there, but I thought that's how it was written. So,
That was not, it was more for private property, like large parking lots and things like that. If
Sure.
somebody, because you see people that have different types of large scale events in parking lots and things like that. So again, once you see it in action, once you read it and once you really understand it and see it function, you're able to kind of make some changes, and that's what we needed to do.
I think it reads pretty good now.
So would like an HOA that's going to invite food trucks to come into their neighborhood, would that be something that would have to be cleared with the city?
So if you're gonna block off the street or anything like that, we would ask that, because that would require city services.
Okay,
So if you're maintaining traffic and things like that, if a food truck was parked on the side of the road and people are able to walk up from the sidewalk, things like that, that would be totally fine. But if you're blocking off roadways, we need to make sure that it's safe, and that would require city services to be able to make sure that that stayed safe.
okay, thank you.
So Melissa, did you take out all of the references to amplified sound? I didn't, skimming through it, I didn't see that.
So where we were, it was only in one section of definitions. So I did take that out and just said any activity such as a festival, carnival, circus, because things that would be occurring in the roadways or on sidewalks or in large parking lots would be things such as that. I felt like the amplified music, any food, any beverage was a little too restrictive. That can be taken very literally. If somebody has a lemonade cart in the park, then somebody could say, well, based on what this says, you need to have a special event permit. And I didn't want to do that. So this was actually language. The original language was kind of it was kind of a mashup of some other special event ordinances that we had found. And, now that we've seen it function, it was kind of overkill for what we need, to put it very bluntly.
And looking at the old language from the previous discussion on the topic of what we were discussing, I did note that we removed special permission for patriotic events. I was a little sad to see that go.
Do what? Say that again?
So in 860, as it defined the different events like schools and church, it also said patriotic events. It's not something worth tripping over, but it was something I thought was kind of nice to see, and I don't see a lot of that anymore. So just a passing comment.
So it was an exclusion of patriotic events?
Yeah, so like for instance, the schools could do an event without having a permit, or you could hold a patriotic event without having a permit.
I think that if we were going to have like a 4th of July parade though, where it would require city services, that's a patriotic event. And I think that we would still want to be able to apply this to that. So I think that it's not necessarily the nature, it's more the place, the placement of the event, not necessarily the content.
Sure, no, I wasn't suggesting that it was a stumbling point. I just thought it was a nice thing to see in the wording, and it was just sad to see it go. So, but I understand where you're coming from also.
So really just looking for any input. If council does not have any recommendations, then I can bring this back to the next meeting. Since the red line version did not show up correctly in the packet, I did email it to everybody. So if anybody would have any kind of comments or any suggestions after tonight's meeting, just go ahead and send them to me, and I can make sure that we discuss that at the next meeting as well, if anybody sends any over.
So the Melissa, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'd just like to make a comment that I think it's good that we're getting rid of the private permits. And the public permits, I look at it like we're inviting people to have their events on public property. And there's a way to do it. So if you do have plans to have an event that would be better on public property, this is a way to do it. And I don't think it just basically alerts the city services and makes that safe and makes it the ability to happen. So I appreciate this update.
It looks a lot cleaner process than what we had before.
Yeah. So if there's any changes, make sure we communicate them back to Melissa by the end of this week, maybe by Friday.
That'd be great.
That makes sense to everybody. If not, we'll see it on the agenda for our May the 24th meeting. Okay, thanks, Melissa. Any more discussion at all? Okay. Next up is the 2021 paving program.
Let's see, I'm gonna stop sharing at this point. All right, so let me get out of here as well. There's one too many Melissa Dodds involved in this meeting. Okay, so I have placed in your packets two different documents. There's a staff report about the 2021 paving program. And then there's also a spreadsheet that is put together by our service director, Ryan Paisley. So that is showing the estimates of the list of the streets that are set to be paved this year, as well as the estimates from the figures that came from the Greene County engineer. So each year, for those that might not remember or just need a refresher, we are part of a collective paving bid through the Greene County engineer's office. So we basically go in with several other municipalities in the county for a volume discount for paving. So they put it out to bid, a contractor is selected, they come in and knock out the whole county. So that typically happens around August. So this is the preliminary planning for that. So we have to tell them which streets we would like to do and get them our quantities because it all goes into the bid. So in the staff report, I kind of talk about the history of our paving program. We had always historically allocated $150,000 to the paving program. And then in 2019, there was an increase in gas taxes that happened. And so we were supposed to fully realize that in 2020. And then the pandemic happened, people stopped driving, gas taxes took a real hard nosedive. So we did still move forward with the additional allocation of $50,000 to the paving program. So $150,000 has came out of our capital improvement fund, which is supported by our general fund. And then we were taking an additional $50,000 out of our streets fund, which receives those gas taxes. So in 2020, we, let's see, we did go with the $200,000 budget. And what we actually spent was $165,000. So it was roughly $15,000 more than what we would typically spend, even though we said that we would go more. But when it's all over and done with and you get the final bill, we build in 6% contingency typically, I think is what Ryan builds in. And with the hopes that that's always going to come out lower. So last year we had 124 come out of the capital improvement fund and 41,000 came out of streets. So in 2021, we went ahead and we set the budget again at $200,000 with 150 out of capital, 50 out of streets. And when we did the capital budget, we said, you know, we'll take a look and see what the gas tax revenues are doing once we get a couple of months in, and here we are. So our 2021 revenues to date in the first quarter, we've received about $91,000 in gas taxes, which puts us on par to receive our budgeted revenues for the year of approximately $375,000. So typically we were receiving about, let's see, $250,000. So we're still set to bring in $125,000 more than what our increase in gas taxes was looking like. So we are on track to bring in 375 as budgeted if all goes well. So we really just need to make the decision as to whether or not we want to go with the additional allocation that we had set last year. So I would like for council to take a look. We've got our streets recommendations, the list of streets that would be repaved this year. We've got Cedar Court, Glenberry Circle, Kensington Drive, which I have on there twice somehow. Oh, it's because Kensington Drive curb to Glenberry and then Tarryton to curb section is the segment description that our service director has. Northfield Drive, Plantation Trail, Poston Drive, and Sable Ridge Drive. So all of the above streets that were recommended there, that was the original list that was submitted to the county for the bid pricing. And that came out to approximately $155,000. And when you add in the 6% contingency buffer that we typically try to shoot for, it comes in at 164. So our service director would like to add on Nob Hill just because it was paved at the same time as Plantation, and Plantation is being redone this year. So he would like to add in Nob Hill, which would add to the budget approximately $35,000. So that would bring us up to 190. And then with our contingency, that would be 202. So again, we expect that contingency would not be fully realized. So I just really need some direction from council if we want to do the original streets, which would be a little less than the $200,000 budget, or if we want to go ahead and use the full $200,000 and add in Nob Hill. Really just looking for direction from council in terms of what you guys would like to see. But with the extra $125,000 coming into streets, I think that we would be able to support it with the information that we have now on our revenues. So I think that we should stick to the $200,000 budget, but you all wanted to be able to discuss that once we had some revenue figures this year. So that's where we're at today.
I think it makes sense to follow Ryan's recommendation because he knows the condition of the streets, and we've been really good about maintaining them before they fall apart so that they stay in good shape.
Yeah,
I
I
second-
agree.
I
I think
second
we do Nob Hill.
Yeah, I did just a quick look at the 21 budget, and it looks like our street fund balance has been maintained relatively well, increasing slightly every year. So I think it's a good call.
Hey, Melissa, just one comment. Since the capital fund for the most part comes from the general fund, correct?
Yes.
Any reason why we can't allocate more of this to the street fund and less to the capital fund?
Yeah, we could do that.
Because I think anything that we take out of the capital fund will give us more of a carryover balance in the general fund with less limitations, whereas the street fund, I think we got a projected, we're running about 225,000 in that account as far as the end of the year. But if it makes sense to allocate a little bit more in there to keep a little bit more in the general fund versus the fund with limitations and restrictions on it, it may be better for a budgetary standpoint. I know the state auditors don't like to see things change, but if we have any real justification to, possibly allocate a little bit more of the street fund, I think that might be the way to go too. But I would support the 200,000.
Typically, this would handle paving in most municipalities. They try to keep it within that budget. Sometimes it's split between the street fund and permissive tax fund, depending on what permissive tax streets a municipality might have. But we could go 50-50 on it pretty easily.
Yeah, I think that might be a benefit to the city. Just keep a little bit more money in the general fund, and if the street fund runs low, we can always kind of adjust that from time to time. I don't think that's in the gray area. I think that'd be pretty much black and white as far as how to allocate it. But yeah, I think maybe 50-50 instead of what we're doing right now.
Melissa, if we didn't spend the extra money this year, are we restricted on what we can spend that money for? Is there a way to like possibly apply it to Little Sugar Creek or anything like that down the road?
So Little Sugar Creek is a permissive tax street, and that has a pretty decent fund balance that we've been kind of using for some of the work that's been done on Little Sugar Creek, the studies and such. So the permissive tax, it is part of our gas tax revenues flow into there, but it's only used on, I think it's been dialed back to only 4 or 5 streets that we can even spend that money on. So permissive tax fund money can pay for Little Sugar Creek, and I think that it should.
But to Ernie's point, if it wasn't a permissive tax road, could we spend some of that money that we didn't spend on a non-permissive tax road?
Yes, and we still could. We could still take money from our streets fund to pay for Little Sugar Creek.
Okay.
Just something to think about. It's a little drop in a big bucket, but it's a big bucket.
Every
little
drop
bit helps.
counts.
Maybe it helps.
Yeah. So is everybody good on going with the 200,000 then, or
Yep.
Yes.
is that the guidance you and Ryan need, Melissa?
Yep, good to go.
Okay, very good. Thanks. Not that you haven't been talking for the last 15 minutes, but next up on the agenda is the city manager report.
Okay, so this will be quick and painless, I promise. So we did apply for the Greene County Municipal Grant, and that was to cover 75% of our streetscape plan project, and we were awarded, which is awesome. So there were 6 projects that had been submitted and only 3 of which were awarded, and we were one of them. So that was really great to hear. So we should be getting a check. Actually, I talked to Eric Henry today, and they're writing up their agreement for the funding, and we should be getting a check very soon. So that's really exciting. So the streetscape plan that we're going to do will only cost the city $88.75, which is great.
Congratulations, very good.
Thank you. Our finance and utility billing software conversion is finally set to happen on May 27th. It should have happened last year, and for a number of reasons, it did not happen. So they've been having a real issue with trying to get things converted from one system to another, and it's taken a lot longer than what we were hoping. So we should be live on the 4th of June, and utility billing customers will have a new website to make payments from, and we're going to make sure that we communicate that through our website, through our utility bills. We can send out hyper reaches to those customers. So we're going to try to really do a good blast of that once that switch is made. Since we're on a quarterly billing process, not everybody will have to have that first bill due when we convert over. It's only going to be, a third of our customers. So we'll make sure that we really start communicating that here real soon. We just got that live date just like last week. So that was some interesting finagling that we had to do, but we did it. I did get communication from the Greene County Budget Commission. They did waive the tax budget filing requirement for 2021. They did that last year as well. So I really just have to, instead of bringing a tax budget to council, you all approving it by way of resolution and then sending it in, I just have to give them where I think we're going to end this year and where we're going to begin next year. And then that's what we go off of. So they did have a really interesting statement though on the letter that I've never seen before in my years as a finance director. It said in quotes, and I put this actually in my update in writing, that they will be looking at budgets closely, and funds with property tax levies which do not show a need based on the budget may be reduced by the commission. I was really surprised to see that. So I'm not sure what made them put that in there. They did have some information that said, lots of people have received coronavirus relief money and they're going to be receiving more money. So make sure you're spending your money or we could reduce your property taxes. So I do want to kind of get a little bit more information as to what triggered that statement, because I was really surprised to actually see that. I know that tax budgets are always your justification of need for your property taxes, but I've never seen that carrot kind of dangled out there to say, if you have more property taxes than what we think you need, then we can dial them back. So I thought that that was really interesting. Bellbrook
Now
TV.
follow up on that, please.
Yes, I will. Bellbrook TV update. So Pam and Lieutenant Narker and firefighter Simmons have been really working to try to get all of this stuff back up and running. I do believe that we have a video that was just like slides set to music again that we're able to go out onto the cable channel today. I'm not sure if it's necessarily live right this moment, but I know that Lieutenant Narker was working on that to get it back up and running. I had actually created the slideshow video myself with information just so that we can be back on air, because in order to receive cable franchise fees, we have to be airing. So we had a piece of equipment go down. We need to replace the equipment, and now the fiber line connection that we had is out of service and has to be moved. It's been a whole thing. So we should be back up and running, but broadcasting right now live, which thankfully we're not all in person, that piece still needs to be figured out, how to get it to go over cable. But Pam and Lieutenant Narker have been working on that, and we're hoping that we will have all of that sorted out very soon. And then American Rescue Plan, today at like 3 o'clock, they finally released the guidance for that. So I have preliminarily looked at it, but I have not had a chance to fully absorb it. We do have until 2024 in which to spend that money. They did expand some of the items, but pretty much the 4 things that you were allowed to spend the money on have pretty much remained pretty solid without a lot of wiggle room. So that'll definitely require future discussion, but we do have the guidance, and I will share that in an upcoming meeting so that we can start thinking about how we might want to allocate whatever it is that we're supposed to be getting, which should be coming any day. But last figure I saw was 1.4 million that would be coming to Bellbrook.
Have the townships been allocated any money yet?
It was not in there.
Still.
No, I specifically looked for that. It mentions states, counties, cities and villages, but it did not mention townships.
I saw it too, and I saw the big cities and little cities and nothing in between. And villages are in there too, you're right.
Yep. So that's it for me.
Any questions of the city manager?
Just one, on the transfer, when the new billing system goes in with the water, is just people who are on automatic payments, will that just flow over, or do they have to sign up all over again?
That's a good question. I need to ask Michaela about that. I think that she is able to directly communicate with all of those people, whatever the answer to that is. I think that they need to sign up for a new, nobody's account number is changing, but they would need to sign up for a new account through the new system. But she can push out email communications because everybody was receiving their bills via email that paid like that. So, or at least a copy of the receipt. So she does have a way to push that out to them.
Any other questions? Thank you, Melissa. You now get a rest. Next up is committee reports, starting with service.
Thank you, Mayor. I spoke with Ryan today, and one of the things about the paving, he told me that there was actually a reduction in asphalt, which is good. I don't know if it made that big a difference, but it went the right direction. The other thing is our PFAS testing that the state is having us all do. Is continuing. Earlier in the year, we found small amounts of PFAS. And when you do that, I mean, these are minute. You have to retest, and that program is ongoing. And so far, we're still good. And the North Bellevue Bridge is totally completely done. All the punch list was completely signed off. So it is where it's supposed to be. And the side of the road is firmed up. And I guess if we had discussed maybe some guardrails or something, if anybody wants to discuss that in the future or at some point, we can. So I guess, Melissa, if you want some guidance or something, we can bring it up, put it on the agenda or something. If we get some feedback, but that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Forrest. Next up, safety.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple quick notes on the fire. Chief Bizzaro just wanted to mention that blood pressure checks are starting this Friday from 10 to 11 at Fire Station 22. That's 4254 West Franklin. And those will be held every Friday as a community service. It's a great opportunity for the community to interact with our fire department and check your blood pressure. From police, Chief Doherty wanted to mention that they received their vest carriers, which were made possible through a donation by the Lions Club. This allows the officers to wear their vests on the outside of their shirt while still looking in uniform. I can only imagine that would be more comfortable, more efficient, more useful. And then the final note is on tornado sirens. Melissa had reached out to Xenia about the possibility of tying in with their system for activating. No final word on that yet, but we're still working. And quotes from the vendors, we're still waiting on those to come in. And that sums up everything on the safety side.
Thank you, DJ. Finance and audit.
Thank you, Mayor. Financial audit, we have our numbers through March 31st, 2021. Total ending balances of all accounts is $7,289,795. Total encumbrances outstanding are $1,511,991 for an unencumbered balance on plan, a little bit below on expenses. We've not done any. If you recall, we delayed the capital budget, so we've not had any capital expenses the first quarter, but I'm sure that'll start to take place. And what I'll need tonight is just a motion to accept these first quarter financial numbers. If anyone has any questions, or if Melissa, you want to add anything, that'd be great.
So Councilman Hoke had asked about some of our expenditures. Our other expenses in debt service were higher than the 25%, which we should be at this year. And so our other expenses, that's mostly been driven up by a carryover encumbrance from 2020 for our coronavirus relief fund. It was about $55,000, I think, carried over and was spent right at the beginning of the year. So sometimes those carryover encumbrances eat up a big part of the budget because part of that budget came over with the encumbrances. And then our debt service, it's just a matter of when our payments are due. So some of our payments are due right at the beginning of the year. And I think we only have 1.5 year payment left to make. So it's just one small payment. So it looks like it's almost fully expended. So that's an easy one just because we know exactly what's coming out in terms of our loan payments. So that's the only abnormality that Councilman Hoke had noticed, and I wanted to make sure that I shared that publicly too.
Anyone else have any questions? Okay, I think we're ready for a motion, Mayor.
We have a motion to approve the first quarter financial update.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Nick. In a second.
I'll second.
Thank you, TJ.
A motion was made by Mr. Edwards to accept the first quarter financials, and this was seconded by Mr. Hoke. Mr. Edwards?
Yes.
Mr. Hope,
Yes.
Mr. Havens,
Yes.
Dr. Van Veldhuizen,
Yes.
Mr. Greenwood,
Yes.
Mrs. Middlestetter,
Yes.
Mayor Schwaller.
Yes. Anything else, Nick?
That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Elaine, Community Affairs.
Okay, we have yet to schedule interviews for the Old Village Review Board. Those will be scheduled soon. We had a surprise resignation from the BZA PRC committee or board. Glenn Costi, who's recently was appointed, has a change of family plans and they are moving to Wisconsin. So we will sadly miss him. He was a good addition, but we now have an opening on the BZA Property Review Commission. It's posted on the website and applications will be accepted through June 10th. And then we will interview to replace Mr. Costi on that board. And I think that's it for community affairs.
Sorry to hear that Glenn's departing us. He was very active and he wanted to get involved, and he certainly did get involved.
Yeah,
Thank you.
lots of changes went on in his family that were unanticipated. And so they're going to Wisconsin to be closer to family there.
Okay, good. Okay, next up, clerk update. Pam?
I actually don't have much for you all. Just upcoming June 7th will be the community leaders meeting being hosted by Sugar Creek Township. And June 14th will be the first resolution to put the general fund levy on the November ballot, followed by another resolution that will be required in July. And that's all I've got tonight.
Thank you very much. This brings us to open discussion of council. We'll start off alphabetically. Forrest.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to make a note. I attended the April Bellbrook Sugar Creek Parks District meeting. And if anyone's interested, their next meeting will be May 27th at 7 o'clock in the morning. Jeff Stewart, the park administrator, and the commissioners, Howard Ackerman, who's the president, Raymond Tisher III is the vice president, and Michael Johnson is a treasurer, and they were all present. They're very pleased to have citizens attend their meetings and make comments. I received several letters along with the rest of council, citizens concerning about the appointment of a new park commissioner. And I went to the meeting to just ask a few questions and ask maybe some of the concerns the citizens were kind of expressing in some of their letters and about the selection process and the selection of the commissioners. I did ask them about the timing of their meetings at 7 o'clock in the morning. The response they gave was it used to be 7 in the evening, and they had a lot of complaints because a lot of persons couldn't attend ball games in the evenings, so they moved it to the mornings. The other concern, a lot of citizens were about the vision moving forward, about more focus on the ball fields. I brought that up at the meeting, and they understood that the need was there. And a lot of this was brought up by the Lions Club, discussions between the Lions Club and the Park District. And it's been about a year, and it kind of fell apart. The Park District's a public entity, and a lot of land is donated to them. Has a lot of strings attached to it as what they can do with some of the land. And I'll just keep it short. It just moving forward, I think they said they would like to work with the Lions Club. And I think as a community, it'd be great to see everybody work together and try to get those ball fields if we can. And I think they were just really happy to see some people come out and talk to them. And it's like here on council, it's great to have citizen input. It helps everybody. So same thing with the park district. And I think if we focused on the kids and the ball fields, it probably come to pass. So that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Forrest. Next up, Ernie.
No comment this meeting.
Thank you. TJ.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to give Melissa kudos on that Greene County grant that's been awarded for the downtown proposal. Looking forward on that. I also just want to highlight for those who got out to the Pee Wee Martin's 100th birthday celebration that was recently. Although when I got out there, it had just started to rain. It still was a impressive event. The amount of people out there saluting not just Pee Wee Martin, but all those who serve the historical displays and artifacts. And I got to see one of the Army Golden Knights parachute. Until you see that in person, it's amazing. And we only just saw one. So I commend all those people who put their lives on the line for our country. And I just wanted to say thank you, Forrest, for those comments regarding the Parks District. Look forward to the future. Thank you.
Thanks, TJ. Yeah. Elaine Middlestetter.
I don't have anything more for tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Councilman Van Veldhuizen.
Nothing tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Edwards.
Nothing more for me tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. I just wanted to thank the Lions Club for the police officers vest they talked about tonight. That's something I think would be value added. And also, I think council got emails today that the Ohio Ethics Commission financial disclosure is due next Monday. And for those in the viewing audience, next Monday is tax day. So a week away from today, May 17th, and that replaces what's heretofore been April 15th. That's all I have. At this point in time, I'd like to open the meeting up to any comments from the viewing audience. Again, state your name, address. You're entitled to 3 minutes. We request that your comments address city matters and not attacks addressed at staff or employees. Pam, is there everybody in the audience who wants to speak tonight?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
Mr. Buccolo?
Hi.
Hi, Dave.
Hi, my throat's a little froggy. David Buccolo, 126 Lower Hillside Drive. If you can't attack city staff or government officials, what's the point? It takes all the fun out of it. I want to thank the mayor and the deputy mayor and the law director for meeting with me. It was an extraordinary meeting. I do want to make this as brief as possible tonight. I don't want to rehash old territory. I would like to remind council members the purpose of recusing yourself is so you don't have to resign. Or the other, well, it's the purpose. Think about it. Think about it logically. The situation with the conflict of interest still exists. I would encourage that person to recuse themselves from planned zoning activities. A complaint is going to be filed with the state of Ohio, probably within the next week or two. I'm slow at doing it. It's not a high priority. It's not a task I look forward to. I was hoping not to have to do it. And it looks like there might be a second complaint also being filed that will not be coming from me, but I've seen paperwork on it and I've seen affidavits. So when I started this, I said, because of the sensitivity of it, I just want to be totally transparent. And if anyone has questions, I do mean anyone, as in anyone, they can feel free to ask me if they want. I don't have any secrets. I did meet with it's interesting you talk about the parks. just by happenstance, I went out and talked to the park district. And I want to state this carefully. The sponsorship of the events at the Bellbrook Park by council member and by his business is not resulting in any income whatsoever into the Bellbrook Sugar Creek Park District. I asked, I said, are you going to get any money from this? They said, no. I said, not a penny, not a dollar, nothing. They said, no. I said, do you have any expectation of receiving any money? They said, no. So I don't understand how the sponsorship is going. I'm also concerned that the name and the logo and the reputation of the park district is being used for personal promotion. I don't understand how. It's a danger when people begin to blur boundaries, you know, the keep in your lane thing, keep your own boundaries. It's just messy. I don't understand people wanting things messy. And I'm going to state this for the record. I'm only stating it for the record, something that you all know. But Mr. Havens has been trespassed by the Bellbrook Police from several business properties in Bellbrook. And those police reports are public record and anyone can get them. Other than that, I have no additional comments, and I hope I made your 3-minute time limit, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Anybody else care to speak from the viewing audience? Going once, going twice? Going 3 times gone? At this time, for the benefit of viewing audience, we're going to adjourn into executive session, and there will be no further business transacted at the end of our executive session. Can I have a motion to adjourn to executive session regarding Ohio Revised Code Section 121.22, capital G, capital 1, to consider the investigation of complaints concerning a public official?
So moved.
And a second, please.
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you. At this point in time, we'll adjourn and we will dial in on the different number to get into our executive session. Thank you, everyone, and thank you for watching.